Well, what awaits fans in the new Making of Star Wars book is over 150,000 words and somewhere around 700 or 800 images. And I think in the deluxe version, over 1,000 images. And those words are basically from what I call the lost interviews. Charles Lippincott, the Vice President of Merchandising and Marketing back in 1975 and 76, 77, did interviews with the key cast and crew of Star Wars. In fact, before the movie even came out. So we found these interviews in our archives, which had literally been sitting in a box for over 30 years, and those interviews became the bedrock for the book. When George Lucas was starting to write Star Wars, he went through several drafts and started with a treatment, and the main characters went through all sorts of variations. And it's one of the things that I try and chart in the book, because it is fascinating to see how some of the characters change. In the treatment, there are two bureaucrats, and of course they both talk and they both argue, and they're both working for the Empire, actually. And then as George progressed through several drafts, they became two robots. Luke Skywalker at one point was named Justin Valor. Basically, at a certain point, Lucas decided, you know what, I'll cut this character in half and I'll make Luke the main character and his twin sister the princess. Because originally, Luke was actually rescuing his brother, Deke Starkiller. And so Lucas had in mind that you basically had one sibling rescuing another. Of course, we didn't find out that Leia was Luke's twin sister till the third film. There was a character, General Skywalker, who was half man, half machine. I think that at one point his name was Kane Starkiller. And finally, it was Darth Vader, who originally just started out as a all-human general who became the half man, half machine. And in fact, I think there were nothing but stumbling blocks as George Lucas tried to make Star Wars. He made a deal with Fox because Alan Ladd Jr. had faith in Lucas based on American Graffiti and based on conversations Ladd had with Lucas. He had faith in Lucas as a director, but frankly didn't understand the early drafts, didn't see how they were going to coalesce into a film that people would understand and like. But Fox, as a studio, really wanted the film to go away because they were sure they were going to lose money on it. And early on in pre-production didn't finance key things in pre-production, like the concept artists and the founding of ILM. And if George Lucas hadn't made American Graffiti, and that movie hadn't been wildly popular and financially successful, he wouldn't have had the funds which he poured into pre-production in Star Wars to the tune of over $400,000. All through shooting he had problems, the robots weren't working, a storm blew apart a set in Tunisia, Alec Guinness almost walked off the film at a certain point during principal photography. When George got back to ILM, they had basically, from his point of view, 0 shots in the can, and they'd already spent their budget, and he almost had a heart attack. And the rumor circulating at that time was that the film was going to kill him. When George Lucas decided he wanted to do Star Wars, his main vision was of an aerial dogfight in space. He started videotaping from TV World War II films and documentaries. And then he honed it down and honed it down and honed it down until it was about 8 minutes long. And this became sort of his calling card when he was working on founding what became ILM. He would show it to special effects experts at that time and say, this is what I want to do, this is what my budget is, and they would say, yes, please go away. And finally, John Dykstra and George Lucas met, and John Dykstra sold George on the idea of doing a motion control camera, which was based on a camera that Doug Trumbull had made. And so, without, sight unseen, basically, Lucas said, okay, well, that's what we'll do. And so that was the most ambitious part of the special effects, was then trying to make the X-Wings and TIE fighters and so on look like they were being filmed by a camera out in space. I'm hoping that the making of Star Wars will, for the older fans, help them reconnect to a film which they fell in love with 30 years ago, and for fans who are perhaps a bit younger, for them to discover how difficult it was for George Lucas to make the first Star Wars film. And he had to fight every inch of the way in order to get that first Star Wars film done.